welcome to How to Retune. Restart it? No.
Yes.
Okay, so it's live in 31 seconds, but it's going up, so I'm not really sure what's going on. Anyway, we're going to start that again. Welcome to How to Retune Your Value Prop to Attract and Win Your Target Buyers. This is Heiman, and we are on the Sales Expert channel, and I am so excited to have Liz Heiman and Lisa Dennis here with me today to talk about this important topic. Lisa just published Value Propositions That Sell, turning your message into a magnet that attracts buyers. So we're going to cover some of the things that are in that book, and I just want to mention that we are going to talk about this important topic of value proposition. I think it gets neglected, and I know that Lisa and Liz are going to agree with me on this, but I wanted to show you some interesting statistics to help you understand how important this really is. We have salespeople out there selling who cannot communicate to the buyer the value proposition clearly enough to get the buyer to buy something. So if you take a look at this chart here, the failure of vendors to demonstrate and explain relevant value propositions does not align with the buyer's needs and interests. We have, without a value prop, the likelihood that we will not even reach the short list. And without a good value prop, it also reduces the likelihood that someone will purchase our solution. So I know we're out there with all these reasons why salespeople can't hit their quota, but what we want you to do today is consider that not having a clear value proposition could be one of the biggest reasons that your salespeople are not hitting their quota. So welcome, Liz and Lisa. How are you guys doing today?
Doing great.
I'm doing terrific, thanks. This is Lisa.
All right. So I really want to just dive right in and give the audience a lot of information on value proposition, what it is, and why they need it. But I want to start with what is a value proposition, because I think that people have different opinions of what it is, and I think we all need to get clear on that. So Liz, would you go ahead and share with us what the standard definition is of a value proposition?
So the standard definition is a clear and succinct statement indicating the specific value of a service or product or offer to a specific audience in order to differentiate its value.
So I think what's really important here is the word differentiate. So you've got an audience, you're trying to sell something to them, and we've got to differentiate ourselves. But see, this definition just doesn't do it for me, Lisa. And I know that you have been studying this, and we have dubbed you the queen of value proposition. So let's get to it. Let's hear what is this really all about?
Okay. The standard definition doesn't cut it anymore, and it's not well done anyway. Here's mine. And I'm going to say it out. Customer-focused. It's a customer-focused description of value that demonstrates your knowledge about the customer's experience or challenge. I'm going to say that part again. It's a description of value that demonstrates your knowledge about the customer's experience or challenge and your specific offer to address it, underscored by what differentiates your offer from any other. And here's the real disconnect that most value props have, which is why they're not relevant to buyers, is that we just start with our offer. We don't talk about the customer's needs, wants, desires, challenges, and fears. We just start with the offer. So they have to connect the dots on value by themselves. And most of us are just touting features and benefits, and that's not enough. That's not value. So if you can embed in the front end of your value prop your knowledge about their experience, that they can actually hear it and feel it, you're way ahead of the game in terms of relevance, which really directly impacts your getting on the short list, and it directly impacts your ability to get a decision in your favor.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I think that this customer focus is so critical. It's amazing to me that I see salespeople out there today who are still calling to book an appointment to do a demo or pitch their product without having any knowledge or understanding of really what's happening for this customer. And they don't even start with a clear value proposition. Okay, we're going to demo. So you booked a demo. Fantastic. But at least starting with this customer-focused statement that will differentiate them, they're not even doing that. And unfortunately, companies are really still training salespeople to book an appointment and pitch. And we just have to start moving away from this. I believe this is one of the main reasons why we aren't hitting our quota. But salespeople don't have what they need. And so let's talk some more about that, about getting these salespeople what they actually need in terms of words, so that they can talk to the customer and demonstrate that they do understand. So let's talk about this shift in perspective. So instead of it's me talking all about me and my products and services and looking, internally to my company, and, this perspective shift from inside out to outside in. So what does that really mean, Lisa?
So what that really means is that you start by focusing on what's going outside in the markets of the customers that you're focused on, right? It's like what's going on in their world that's forcing them to make decisions. What are they faced with? What are they challenged with? What are their goals and objectives? You basically have to step outside of your own company, outside of your own allegiance to your products and services to really go find out what they're all about. As opposed to the way we typically look at it, which is we want to make sure that they plug into what we have to offer. And so we go too quick, actually. We slow down the sale by going too quick to the pitch of our own offering. So flipping inside out to outside in means taking a breath and figuring out what it is that they're really talking about and thinking about and needing, and actually talking to them about that first.
Gotcha. And Liz, how do you see salespeople getting the information that they need? What are some ways they can get that information and use that?
Well, there's a number of ways. We always want to start by just finding what we can that's out there on the internet. So if you just start by looking at LinkedIn profiles, learning as much as you can about the people who you're going to be talking to, look at their Google page, look for articles, look for ways that you can learn about them. And then you want to be looking for what's going on in their industry. What issues are they facing?
Yeah, I noticed that on social media posts a lot of times, companies are posting things that are affecting them or trends that they are battling by saying, hey, here's how we're different. So they're trying to differentiate themselves in their own market space, and you need to understand how you're going to impact that and help them do that, right?
Yeah. So you just want to look around and see what's out there. What are they writing? And, it's interesting, but a lot of times if you have a contact, a relationship in a business, or in a customer, you'll often be able to find out a little bit about the people that you're selling to in that business and what's important to them.
Right. So the perspective shift from inside out to outside in is really learning what they are trying to accomplish, learning everything we can in their industry and about the people who will make the decisions, as well as their company and what the company's facing in the marketplace. And the salespeople can take that information to design some language that will attract the buyer to them versus repelling them by just pitching. So, Lisa, how does the sales team get the value proposition typically? I mean, what have you
Typically?
seen? Yeah, typically.
Well, yeah, typically. So depends on the size of the organization. The larger ones may get it kind of embedded in a playbook of sorts. Or they might get it embedded in kind of product materials, particularly around a launch. It's usually not done separately. It's usually not really rolled out per se. It's usually part of a lot of other stuff. If you go to the smaller companies, it almost doesn't get rolled out at all. We just pitch the campaigns, the emails, the brochureware, the website or whatever, they just sort of gets pitched at them, and they've got to kind of go with it from that point. Every time I do work with people and I actually roll out the value prop, the people who are most surprised by that act in itself are the salespeople, because nobody ever does it for them. Nobody discusses it with them. Nobody gives them all the tools that go with it. They're sort of on their own.
Yeah, on their own. So Liz, what do you see salespeople doing who don't get a clear value prop from their leadership and marketing team?
Well, they do exactly what we expect them to do. They make it up. And that means that every salesperson that you have out in the field is saying something different because they've made it up themselves. So we really want to be sure that we have a value proposition that's clear and strong, that comes from leadership in the organization, maybe through the marketing team for some doctoring, but that it goes out to the sales team that way with some clarity.
Yeah, they need the words, and if you don't give them the words, then they figure out on their own somehow what their value prop is. And what's interesting, Lisa, is I think you and I were talking about this the other day. You walk into a company and you ask 6 different people what is the value proposition and what happens.
You get 6 different answers. It's surprising how often that happens. I usually start workshops that way, and it's really, really eye-opening.
It is.
You know why? Because the value prop typically gets launched in content, in marketing content, with external parties before it gets launched internally with salespeople. That's the real disconnect right there.
Yeah, because salespeople don't get any say into it, and they're the ones talking to the customers. So,
Right.
if they've heard the customer needs and wants, they can have value and add value back. But so, Lisa, what does the sales team actually need? I'll ask both of you, Lisa first and then Liz. What does the sales team actually need in order to be successful around value props?
Way more than an elevator pitch, which is what most people get.
Really?
Way more. But that's what a lot of people think a value prop is. So really what you need is like a full kind of array of tools. I call it a value prop platform. And so what you're talking about is your full value prop statement, which actually should have a customer or buyer objective statement, then your offer, then your differentiators. You ought to have a set of what I call value drivers, kind of key points of value that are in the mind of the buyer when they go to make a decision about your product or services. You ought to be able to quantify every one of those value drivers. You ought to be able to offer objective third-party proof. You should serve up some storylines for them, email scripts, call scripts, if they're relevant, like case studies or use cases. I mean, and then by the way, you can give them the elevator pitch after you've given them all of that, because now they have a full understanding and they have all these tools that they can use to actually speak intelligently to the buyer's concerns.
Right, and then they need to practice, Liz. So let's talk about that. So even if we give them all of that, right?
They do need to practice. But before I answer that, what I want to say is that elevator pitch is not the one that we learn to give that says, my company does this. The elevator pitch that we're talking about in this case is, here are the problems that we solve for companies like yours.
Perfect. Absolutely.
So that's really important. This is not the traditional elevator pitch that's all about me. But so how do they practice? That's a really, really good question, because just because they've read it on paper doesn't mean they're able to actually articulate it appropriately in front of a customer. So how do we practice? Well, we can practice in teams. We can practice. There's lots of great tools out there where the sales manager can watch the team record them and give feedback. But I think that one of the things that we miss is we have a great opportunity at every sales meeting to take a few minutes and work on things like value proposition and practicing and hearing how different people use it and how different people say it or emphasize it, and just kind of listen to each other.
Yeah, and I know salespeople always say they hate to role play, but here's what I hate more. I hate when they practice stuff on our customers instead of practicing it before they reach our customers. So I can't implore you enough to make sure that you have time for salespeople to, take this information in, talk about it together, talk it out loud, practice it before they go and use it on the customer. I think it's It's really just critical stuff. So that's what the sales team needs. They need all of those things. They need the language, the pitch, the tagline, the email scripts, the call scripts, the relevant use cases, all the value points. They need all of that, and they need to have it in a form that they can use it, and they need to practice it. Now, an interesting thing that comes up often when I'm talking to companies about value proposition, and when I ask them, do you have one even, they say, well, yeah, we kind of have one, or, they give me this long, convoluted, and I'm like, no, that's not a value prop. And then they say, well, the problem is we have so many products. And we don't, is it by division or whatever? They're always asking, well, should we have more than one value proposition for a company? So, Lisa, what do you think? Should there be more than one value proposition?
Absolutely, and here's why. A one-size-fits-all value proposition fits nobody. I don't know about you, but I have a closet full of clothes like that. The fact of the matter is, right? The fact is that if you try to make it fit everybody, it's going to be really challenging. What if you're in selling into 4 different industries? What if there are different types of buyers? What about the influencers who help the buyers make the decision? They all have different needs. They all have different understanding. They have value points in their head that are different. So you really need to think through about what complement of value props do I need? Does it mean you have to start from scratch with a blank piece of paper? If, let's say, you need 5 versions, right? You don't. It's a versioning. What's the foundational one? Who's the key decision maker? And then look at who surrounds that person or who else is on the buying team that I have to make a version for. That way, it's much easier for a salesperson to pivot depending upon who they're talking to.
And this is, again, why it's so important to have this written out in practice. So, Liz, we think about, okay, the vision for a company and what they're trying to accomplish and what products they have to sell and who they're selling them to. And so we come up with this kind of overarching value proposition, and then we need to take that and do what?
Well, you need to look at your product line. So some companies have one product line. They have one, and they can have one value proposition that sort of talks about what the company does in a way that's really clear and relevant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Some companies have product lines that are extremely different. And so when that's the case, sometimes we need an overarching value proposition, but then we need to look at these different product lines that have maybe completely different kinds of results and completely different kinds of problems that they solve, and think about how would I create a value proposition for this product or product line that really speaks to my customers about the problems that they're having.
So from listening to both of you, it sounds to me like we have to really take, again, that outside-in approach and say, what are we selling and who are we selling into and why does it matter to them? So if I have a lot of product lines and each of those product lines have different buying influences, I need messaging that works for each product line and each of the buying influences who are looking at that product line. Am I right?
Yeah.
Yes, you are. I think one other thing, just to comment on, add something to what Liz said about sometimes you need an overarching company version of a value prop. One of the things that a lot of organizations get mixed up is that an overarching kind of company version of a value prop is not a mission statement. A mission, right. and they tend to sound like it. So a mission statement is very inside focused, right? And so if your value prop for your overall organization, your company sounds like that, you haven't done it right. You literally have to think about, how do I describe our company in a way that's relevant and meaningful for the people outside of my organization I'm trying to engage and attract? And a mission statement isn't one of them, because honestly, it's nice to have a great mission and all these wonderful things that are important to the people that work for you, but it doesn't really matter for the most part to your buyers.
Yeah. No, and I think, Lisa, we have to actually stand in our customer's shoes, and I think that's the hardest part. We are always standing inside our own company looking out, and you can't understand a value proposition until you are looking at the world from your customer's perspective.
Yeah, important. So, if you have a big vision for your company to be the premier provider of, that's great for your all the people who work for you to know that that's the direction you're all marching and your mission is who you serve and all that stuff. But the value proposition really has to be all about the customers, what they're facing in the market, the trends that are impacting them, how they're going to solve their problems, how you're going to help them solve those problems. So I think that we really have to make sure we're not just throwing out, oh, our vision, well, that can be our value proposition. No, it can't. One is internal and the other is external.
Absolutely, and I think that's just a really, really important distinction because I see that kind of misnomer happen all the time.
Yeah.
All the time.
So the key here is differentiating ourselves. We started with that, and we need to continue with that. We are trying to differentiate our company, our products, our services, our sellers, the way we sell. We're trying to differentiate ourselves from the other people who compete with us. And if we don't speak the customer's language, we can't really do that. So we keep hearing differentiators. Well, what are differentiators and how do you use them? Liz, I'll let you start this time. What are differentiators and how do you use them?
Well, what's really interesting is, first of all, differentiators are those things, simply enough, that make us different from our competitors. And typically when we start asking people about differentiators, they list the same things their competitors would list. Oh, we get stuff done on time. Oh, we have a great team. Oh, our product has this feature or benefit. But what they're not able to do is really look from the customer's perspective and say, of the things that I deliver, what things are going to have the greatest impact on our customer that my competitors can't deliver. So that's my sense of understanding a differentiator.
Yeah, so Lisa, how do we help companies get out of that, oh, our people are better and our stuff is better, like everybody's differentiator is the same. How do you help them find some things that are really a bit different about them or more unique about them?
Sure. One of the things I would say is that a lot of people lock onto a feature, and the minute you lock onto a feature that differentiates you, unless you have a patent keeping everybody away from it, the clock is ticking and how long you're going to be the only one to do it. What you're really trying to look for is one or two, no more than that, truly unique things that A, relate to the value drivers in the mind of the customer, B, that you can actually quantify, and C, that you can offer third-party objective proof. And a lot of differentiators fall right out of your list of differentiators because you can't quantify them and you can't prove them.
Yeah.
So all this kind of really squishy stuff like, oh, we're customer focused. I regularly do a messaging scan when I work with companies on their value props, and we look at anywhere from 5 to 10 of their competitors, and on average, I'd say close to 75% of them are all saying the same things, and they're trying to stuff their value props with more differentiators. And more differentiators isn't really about more value because you don't really know which one of those things your particular buyers are really, really keyed into. So it's really netting it out. What can I quantify that relates to those points of value in the buyer's head? And then how do I get third-party proof to back it up? Those differentiators stand out because they're very buyer-focused. They're very they're like a box, like they're something you can see and touch because you can quantify them and because you can prove them. And what it means is when you brainstorm differentiators, you actually have to use like customer language. You have to actually go find out what they really are looking for. What's different to them? Doing a buyer-focused value prop really means knowing a whole heck of a lot more about your buyer than most companies do today. So you have a lot of homework to do.
Lisa, when I hear what you're saying, I always imagine the customer looking up at me when I say, here's how we're different, here's how we're better, and they look up at me and say, so what?
Exactly.
So what?
Exactly.
And then as soon as I can answer that, they say, prove it. And I think that's an easy way to sort of remember all of the things that you were just explaining is that's how the customer sees us. I've heard this before. So what? What's it got to do with me?
I just did a workshop a couple of weeks ago. Same thing. I said the same thing over and over. Everyone they brought up, I said, so what? So that they could attempt to prove it. And a lot of them dropped out because of that.
Yeah. Yeah. So do we have to actually go ask our customers why they buy from us?
Yes.
Yep. Yep.
I think
Absolutely.
that's a wise too. Go ask them exactly why. So once we get these differentiators, how do we use them? How do we actually get the salespeople, okay, we've got this one or two things, and we've got all these different buying influences, right, who care about different things. How do we use these differentiators, Lisa?
So you have to look at how you work that into the story. Like, for example, if you have a really good, strong, verifiable differentiator, you might want to embed that in your elevator pitch to get a little bit of attention, but you want to build a story around it. It's just not enough to say I'm different and beat your chest. It really isn't. So you're going to take the overall value proposition platform that we've talked about here, and you're going to kind of assemble all of the pieces so that it's pretty modular. So if I need to talk about any one of these value points, value drivers, for example, I could literally tell a story because I would have a third-party testimonial to back it up, or a case study, or a use case to back it up. Suddenly, I'm talking about something that's buyer-focused, but I have the pieces of it that I want. You can actually script out a full-blown story. You can build all kinds of content around it. Thought leadership with a talk track that your salesperson can speak to. There's a lot of ways to build out that story because you can't predict what your buyers are going to say, right? So you can't prepare them with just one story. What you want to do is give them the tools and then show them how to pivot. So if this is what they're most important with, here's your talk track, here's your storyline, here's your proof, here's your case studies, here's, you know what I'm saying? So that it literally breaks out into almost like a little map. It's like, okay, here are the different places this conversation could go, and given who I'm talking to, I can test a couple of these points, and then I can go from there.
Yeah, I think story is so important, and if we can use our differentiators to build a strong story. I read every day sales experts out there publishing articles saying salespeople have to learn to tell a story. They have to learn how to speak the customer's language and weave these differentiators into a story that proves that they can do what they say they can do, and that they can help, and that they can make a difference. So I love that. Using those differentiators in the story is really important. So
I think can I just add one thing? I think what's sometimes challenging is, there's lots of trainings on like how to teach salespeople to tell stories, but the problem is that the material for the story isn't there. They're trying to get them to extemporaneously tell a story when all they have is product or service messaging.
Oh,
and
right.
They don't actually have buyer messaging. So there's this push to be a storyteller, but it's really hard because you don't really have what you need to begin with. And I think that's the big challenge.
And then the story becomes all about us and not about our customers.
Yes,
and totally
exactly.
So once again, we have to collect those stories, teach them to the salespeople, have them practice, and know how to use the differentiators and their value proposition in the story to make it fun and interesting, and so that the buyer can be engaged and they can remember, because the story is what they remember, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Lisa, I know in your new book, Value Propositions That Sell, you've got your value proposition platform. Can you share some of that with us?
Sure. So it's kind of a very modular, it's a 2-page document that really would effectively give you your roadmap for the value prop, and then you can use it with salespeople, you can use it with your content creators, you can use it with your product marketing team, you can use it with your agency, you can use it with your local marketing person, your web person. I mean, it's really usable. So it starts out with really nailing down who my targets are. I find every time I do this, I push really hard. What sectors, industries, and segments are you in? And those are, some people say, oh, well, we're in the manufacturing industry. Well, there are like 386 sub-segments in manufacturing. Are you in all of them? So that's always an eye-opener, right? So you nail that down, and then from there you go, okay, so who are the key decision makers and who are the key influencers in each of those primary industries and segments that you are in? And to really kind of, because marketing isn't about marketing to everybody. We're not selling cereal for the most part, most of us, right? So it's like who you're really aiming at. Less is more. And then to be able to identify, okay, with this particular industry and segment and decision maker, here are their needs, issues, challenges, right? Then that's the second section. And then from that, you can translate it into the buyer objective statement. You literally take those needs and you weave it into a short statement about what the buyer's trying to do. Then you connect your offer statement and only talk about specifically what your offer does to address those needs. You don't shove in everything there is to know about your product because that buyer doesn't care. They only care about their stuff. Then you back up your specific offer statement for that specific buyer set of objectives with differentiators that are relevant and matter, one or two only, and then you add the quantification, the proof, and the value drivers. And that gives you, and then you pull out of that your elevator pitch, and you could pull out a tagline. And that gives you your platform.
Yeah, that's so what and prove it, right? It's all got to come down to that in the end. You got to be prepared for it.
Right. And a lot of times that doesn't get built into the value prop. It sort of happens later where you have to connect the dots later. In all the years I've been doing this work, I have never seen a marketing department serve those up in one place. Unless you've got like a sales enablement team who's trying to do that by creating these playbooks. And not everybody's organization has the resources, the money to put those things together. But they kind of tend to do a bigger job, though they tend to be pretty product service focused.
Yeah, well, this is one place where sales and marketing absolutely have to be aligned. They need to be aligned anyway, and they need to collaborate on this value proposition. And using your platform will make it easy for them to work together to come up with all of the pieces that the sales team needs. But one of the things you mentioned, and I'll address this to Liz, that I know you both feel this is so important, is personalizing these value propositions. So the thing is that salespeople have to be smart and be able to think on their feet. I'm talking to a CEO who cares about X. How do I use my value proposition to personalize? So, Liz, how do we get salespeople to understand that the value prop is going to be used a little differently, the words are going to change a little bit depending on who they're talking to and what that person cares about?
Well, I think that first thing is that as, sales leaders, it's our job to make sure we have these conversations. So as we're doing sales strategies, we need to ask tough questions. What do you know about the CEO? What are the initiatives in the company right now? What are the most important things that they're trying to solve? Then I can begin to understand how might I personalize a value proposition for this CEO. There's a certain amount that we understand about CEOs in general and the kinds of things that they care about. They don't really care how many bits or parts or pieces or how exactly it works. They really want to know about what are the results. We always talk about return on investment, which I think gets way overused with salespeople. But the return on the investment is specific to what they're trying to accomplish. And then if we look at each of the individuals in the buying process, we can ask them questions about what they're trying to accomplish. What isn't working for you? Why do you need this solution? How will it help you? Then once we begin to understand why they're making this decision, why they want this solution, we can begin to speak to them using value propositions that address their specific issues.
Yeah, so Lisa, if the sales team isn't well-versed, this just doesn't work, right? Because they have to understand the value proposition, but then they have to understand that it can be different for each buying influence. And so they actually have to have a conversation in order to do this, right?
They absolutely do. They absolutely do, because a really good salesperson needs to be able to pivot the conversation to the things that concern those in the room. And half the time, you're in the room with more than one person. So what if you're sitting in the room and you have a financial person in the room and you have an ops person in the room and maybe you have a senior executive in the room? What are you supposed to say then? Right? That's where the one-size-fits-all thing gets you completely in a knot, because it's not relevant to anybody. So you really have to kind of nail down and go, okay, so what are let's look at this from those different viewpoints, and we can kind of version the language from there. And, sometimes it's not as simple as, sometimes I hear companies say, well, we'll just do industry versions. You got to take it down a notch to the people who are making the decisions, or the people who have the heavy influence, because they're the ones who are shepherding or chasing your offer out the door. It's one or the other. So the personalization is what really matters.
Well, and I think, too, the job of a salesperson today is to take these many different buying influences who have different concerns and help bring insights that will bring them to consensus. And they can't do this if they don't have a strong value proposition, right? Because for 5 different people sitting in the room, they have 5 different sets of concerns, and you've got to address all of those. So you've got to be prepared to look at each one of them and say, I know you have these kinds of concerns, and here's how we address them, and pull in the insights that are going to bring them all to consensus. And you just simply can't do it if you don't have a good, strong value proposition to start with.
Exactly. I agree.
Yeah. All right. Well, so as we wrap up here, ladies, I want to talk about how everyone can get more information on how to have a value proposition that will help them sell. So, starting at the top of the organization, having that strong messaging for marketing with their marketing messaging, having it flow down to sales, and sales being able to use it in the many variety of ways that we mentioned. I want to talk about that. Now, there are some attachments that you can all see there. If you look underneath this, just below where you're watching the screen change, it'll say attachments and links, and you can click that, and you will be able to see that we have given you some different places to get more information, to read more, to learn more. But Lisa's new book is out, and it's so exciting, and I kid you not, this book is so easy to read, and the instructions, you really can sit with your team and follow these instructions. Lisa, thank you for writing such a clear set of instructions for us to follow on value proposition.
Thank you. It was really important, I think, for me to make this a practitioner's book as opposed to a theory book. And all of my templates are downloadable. So you can actually progress chapter by chapter, download the relevant templates, and get to work, which I think is helpful. There are 2 really in-depth case studies, one with a smaller business and one of more of an enterprise-sized business. And you can actually, we share the whole process, including all the drafts. So you can actually see how you get from step 1 to the end, and you can actually see the decisions that you have to make and how these 2 companies made them. So it really gets you inside the mind of 2 organizations that worked with me to craft their value props. So I think it's good that way.
Love that. And I know that you can get that book on Amazon because that's where I bought my copy. And there's also a link to the book right below. Again, if you just click the link, it will take you right to where you can purchase the book on the website. Barnes & Noble is another place that you can get that. And then, Liz, tell us about the Simple Plan. All of us work with another great sales expert, Laura Posey, and she has done a great job of putting together some online programs for people. So, Liz, you want to tell us a little bit about the Simple Plan?
So the Simple Plan takes the ideas that are in Lisa's book, that are in value propositions that sell, and it puts it into an online training format so that you can actually listen to Lisa talk about it, and then you can go through and do the worksheets and the assignments. So you can either do that yourself or you can do it with a coach. And if you'd like to do it with a coach, I would be available to coach you through that process. So if you go to the link again under attachments, you'll find one that says, let's see,
Simple
Success Plan. And if you click there, you can purchase the program or you can reach out to us to talk about how to get coaching.
Right. So those are some do-it-yourself options, and then we do have some team options. There's workshops that you can do, and I don't want to talk too much about it now, but I will tell you that both Lisa and Liz conduct these face-to-face workshops that are just phenomenal. They give you the pre-work so you come completely prepared. You have a workbook, and then you have weeks of follow-up, and you really will get this done. We want you to have an amazing value proposition. We want you to have value propositions for each product and for each buyer persona that you need them for. And we just really want to make this work for your sales and marketing team. And so, again, there's do-it-yourself options or do it with us, but we're here to help. So, get a hold of us and ask us questions, and we're going to be happy to help you with value proposition. So any last words, Lisa, and then I'll ask Liz. Any last words for our audience?
Sure. Just one thing on order, if you do the simple value prop plan, when you click on that link, you get an option to sign up for the class. You can also get an option to sign up for coaching. There's actually links for both embedded in there, just so you know.
Oh,
and so that's just something to know. And I guess my last thought is you got to think outside in. If you want to create more engagement and you want to make your buyer step towards you, talk about them. They're more interested in talking about themselves than they are about you.
Right. And Liz, last word?
I just reiterate what Lisa said, which is it's all about our customer and their problems, what they're trying to solve or accomplish. And if we want our value propositions to have impact, then we need to do it from our customer's perspective. I want to encourage you also, go to the attachments and links and just check those out. There's a place where you can schedule an appointment with Lisa. You can order the book. There's a link to our blog, the Alice Heiman LLC blog, that has an article on value proposition. You can check out our Facebook Live where we talked about value proposition. So there's lots more opportunities to learn about value proposition. And if you're ready, when you're ready to start working on it, we're here to help you.
Yeah, thank you, ladies. I so appreciate this. It's so important, and I just can't tell you how many times I work with a sales team, and I'm just so frustrated because they don't have the information they need. They don't have value propositions. They don't have differentiators. They don't know how to use them, and it's just so important. If we want our sales teams to hit their quotas, we have to do this work. It's hard, but it's fun, and it will make a huge difference. So thank you all for being with us on the Sales Expert channel. Thank you, Lisa Dennis. Thank you, Liz Heiman. And we'll look forward to hearing from all of you. Have a great day.